Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. Industrial policy is in focus again as government weighs various interventions to salvage industries that are at risk of closure. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the options and the risks. Hi, Terence.
Hi, Chanel.
Steel and ferrochrome are particular areas of focus.
Yes, we've known for months now that ArcelorMittal has been wanting to widen down its longs business. It had an interest-free loan from the IDC to keep it open till the end of September. We know they've sort of put Newcastle into care and maintenance, and there's still talks apparently around bringing that operation back to life in some form. Talks about a big equity deal potentially, but we haven't really seen any final framework in place. And obviously there's industrial policy levers, there's the industrial financing that they're getting from the IDC. There's already the controversial price preference system for scrap and an export tax in place, which ArcelorMittal says has made it more uncompetitive relative to the scrap-based mini mills. So there's these sort of policy discussions underway, plus they applied for a negotiated pricing agreement from NERSA, and they've been given that for cheaper electricity. So there have been a number of levers that have been pulled. And then ferrochrome, there's also a lot of discussion there about what to do. We've seen a massive closure of our ferrochrome smelters. We are exporting a lot of chrome ore. It's getting beneficiated mostly in China. And there too, the levers of industrial policy are being looked at. Export tax, which seems unpopular even with some ministers, export quotas, those sort of discussions are in place, as well as electricity.
Government is also considering using the tariff review and electricity as an intervention.
Yes, we've got massive tariff reviews underway at ITAC, and they're looking at this, particularly in the steel sector, they're looking at the full tariff book. It's a number of tariff lines, looking at whether we should raise the import duty to the bound rate, the WTO bound rate, to try to protect a number of both upstream and downstream industries. And there's sort of a process is underway, and there have been a number of these sort of gazette notices and opportunities to comment. So that's one of the levers that are being looked at. And then, as I said earlier, this whole issue around electricity, both particularly ferrochrome, but steel as well, uses a lot of electricity in its processes. And we already have seen, controversially somewhat, that ArcelorMittal has received a negotiated pricing agreement approval from NERSA against the will of Eskom, because Eskom felt that ArcelorMittal, unlike some of the other heavy electricity using industries, didn't quite meet the criteria for a negotiated pricing agreement. NERSA has disagreed, and they've put out their reasons for decision now. And I suppose Eskom will have to decide, whether it's going to contest that legally. We haven't heard anything on that front, but there is a contestation around that, but it has been granted, which means that their tariff will be more favourable. And then, as part of the discussions around saving ferrochrome smelting, there's a big discussion about what electricity can be set aside now that Eskom has gone into a surplus position for the first time in many, many years, and use part of that surplus for the ferrochrome industry at a very discounted rate. And this would be a negotiated pricing agreement on steroids, it seems. It would be a much bigger discount. So this is back to the future in some ways. During the 1990s, electricity was South Africa's probably only industrial policy tool that we pulled in opening up a number of industries, and the aluminium smelters being the case in point. But, that was a big tool in our armory, but that was when we also had surplus electricity, and we didn't have the same sort of climate pressures around our electricity that we have today. So we had cheap coal-based electricity. Again, we've got coal-based electricity that seems to be in surplus at the moment, that could be mopped up easily by these ferrochrome smelters if a deal is given. But it's no longer cheap, and they'll have to discount it. And to pay for that discounted, as with all negotiated pricing agreements, it falls to the rest of the consumer base. So the rest of us that buy electricity through the standard tariff, that is either directly through Eskom or indirectly through the municipalities, that we would have to pay for that. Or government would have to come in with some sort of subsidy, which we know there's no fiscal space for that. So it would basically fall to the rest of the consumers. And generally, these NPAs have been untransparent, so we don't really know the cost benefits here. We have to just rely that this has been done in the background, which I don't think in this atmosphere is going to wash.
As you've indicated, these trade-offs are being contested.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the Minerals Council has raised a number of issues around an export tax on chrome, quotas on chrome. Is chrome, chrome ore gets exported. We do earn foreign exchange through that. It's quite a big part of what our export base. It helps platinum and PGM miners quite a bit. They export chrome as a byproduct, chrome ore as a byproduct. There are these illegal chrome mines. So we're looking at trying to kill many birds with one stone here, and it's quite tricky. So there's the quota, there's the tax, but there's a process. So ITAC has a process out to let people comment on that, and I think we're going to see quite a bit of pushback around quotas and taxes, maybe more on the tax side, but definitely on both there's going to be issues. Then on the electricity front, I think people are going to want to see a transparent discussion on this. Who's going to pay for it? What is it going to mean for the rest of it? What does it mean for Eskom's commitment that it made at its financial results for sustaining, electricity tariffs at single-digit levels? We know that we had double-digit tariff increases this year, and they were supposed to be well below, 10% coming next year, but they've been pushed up through this behind closed door settlement between NERSA and Eskom. When Eskom came to NERSA and showed the errors in its calculation of its regulatory asset base, NERSA had to settle, and it could have been 107 billion. It's 54 billion is the settlement, and that has to be recovered in the tariff. So we know that next year it's going to be close to 9%. Increase in the standard tariff, and the following year. Now, if you add negotiated pricing agreements that weren't considered at the time, which is the ArcelorMittal one, and potentially one on steroids with the ferrochrome smelter, how are we going to keep single-digit increases for the rest of electricity consumers is a big question, because we have to pay for that in some way. So this needs sunlight. We can't make this deal behind closed doors. This has to be a discussion. It has to be, all stakeholders need to be part of it. The downside and the upsides need to be canvassed. And two, the electricity minister's credit, Jose Ntsaramagopa, he said, look, when looking at this, there are no good options, and he acknowledges that. But we have a crisis situation in ferrochrome where smelters are closing, and electricity is a major factor in that. And is there a way to use, say, this new surplus that's available from Eskom to support them over a period? Possibly. But I think it must be done in the open, and there must be a sunset clause. I don't think this can be an open-ended agreement. There has to be a time frame to this if there is going to be this support given to these industries.
Thank you. That's the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.